and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we're going to continue our reading of The Rolling Stones by Robert Heinlein. The Rolling Stone swung on and outward toward Mars. Her crew fell into routine habits. Dr. Stone was handy at weightless cooking, unusually skillful, in fact, from techniques she had picked up during a year's internship in the Freefall Research Clinic in Earth Station. Meade was not so skilled, but very little can be done to ruin breakfast. Her father supervised her hydroponic duties, supplementing thereby the course she had had in Luna City High School. Dr. Stone split the care of her least child with his grandmother and used her leisure placidly collating some years of notes from a paper on the cumulative effects of marginal hypoxia. The twins discovered that mathematics could be even more interesting than they had thought and much more difficult. It required even more savvy than they thought they had, already a generous estimate, and they were forced to stretch their brains. Their father caught up on the back issues of Retromotive World and studied his ship's manual, but still had plenty of time to coach them and quiz them. Pollux, he discovered, was deficient in the ability to visualize a curve on glancing at an equation. I don't understand it, he said. You got good marks in analytical geometry. Pollux turned red. What's biting you? His father demanded. Well, Dad, you see, it's this way. Go on. Well, I didn't exactly get good marks in analyt. Hey, what's this? You both got top marks. I remember clearly. Well, now, you see, we were awful busy that semester, and, well, it seemed logical. His voice trailed off. Out with it, out with it. Cass took both courses in analyt, Pollux blurted out, and I took both courses in history. But I did read the book. Oh my, Roger Stone sighed. I suppose it's covered by the statute of limitations by this time. Anyhow, you are finding out the hard way that such offenses carry their own punishments. When you need it, you don't know it worth a hoot. Yes, sir. But an extra hour a day for you just the same until you can visualize instantly from the equation of four-coordinate hypersurface in a non-Euclidean continuum, standing on your head in a cold shower. Yes, sir. Cass, what course did you fudge? Did you read the book? Yes, sir. It was medieval European history, sir. Hmm. You're equally culpable, but I'm not too much concerned with any course that does not require a slide rule and tables. You coach your brother. Aye, aye, sir. If you are pinched for time, I'll give you a hand with those broken down bicycles, though I shouldn't. The twins pitched into it hard. At the end of 2 weeks, Roger Stone announced himself satisfied with Pollux's proficiency in analytical geometry. They moved on to more rarefied heights, the complex logics of matrix algebra, frozen in beautiful arrays, the tensor calculus that unlocks the atom, the wild and wonderful field equations that make man king of the universe, the crashing, mind splitting intuition of Forsyte's solution that had opened the 21st century and sent mankind another mighty step toward the stars. By the time Mars shone larger in the sky than Earth, they had gone beyond the point where their father could coach them. They plowed on together. They usually studied together out of the same book, floating head to head in their bunk room, one set of feet pointed to celestial south, the other pair to north. The twins had early gotten into the habit of reading the same book at the same time. As a result, either of them could read upside down as easily as in the conventional attitude. So, while so engaged, Pollux said to his brother, You ought to go into research rather than business. After all, money isn't everything. No, agreed Castor. There are also stocks, bonds, and patent rights, not to mention real estate and chattels. I'm serious. We'll do both. I finished this page. Flip the switch when you're ready. The war god, riding in a slightly different orbit, had been gradually closing on them until she could be seen as a star by naked eye, a variable star that winked out and flared up every 16 seconds. Through the stone's coleostat, the cause could be easily seen. The war god was tumbling end over end, performing one full revolution every 32 seconds to provide centrifugal artificial gravity to coddle the tender stomachs of her groundhog passengers. Each half revolution, the sun's rays struck her polished skin at the proper angle to flash a dazzling gleam at the stone. Through the scope, the reflection was bright enough to hurt the eyes. The observation turned out to be both ways. A radio message came in. Hazel printed it and handed it with a straight face to her son. War God to Rolling Stone, private. Raj, old boy, I have you in the scope. What in space have you got on you? Fungus or seaweeds? You look like a Christmas tree. P. Vandenberg, master. Captain Stone glared at the message stat. Why, that fat Dutchman, I'll fungus him. Here, mother, send this. Master to master private message. In that drunken tumbling pigeon, how do you keep your eye to a scope? Do you enjoy playing nursemaid to a litter of groundhogs? No doubt the dowagers fight over a chance to eat at the captain's table. Fun, I'll bet. R. Stone, master. The answer came back, Roger Dodger, you old codger, I've limited my table to female passengers circa age 20 so I can keep an eye on them, preference given to blondes around 50 kilos mass. Come over for dinner. Van. Pollux looked out the port, caught the glint on the war god. Why don't you take him up, Dad? I'll bet you could make it across in my suit jet with one spare oxy bottle. Don't be silly. We don't have that much safety line, even at the closest approach. Hazel, tell him thanks a million, but I've got the prettiest little girl in the system cooking for me right now. Meade said, Me, Daddy? I thought you didn't like my cooking. Don't give yourself airs, Snubnose. I mean your mother, of course. Meade considered this. But I look like her, don't I? Some. Send it, Hazel. Right you are. My respects to Edith. Truthfully, what is that stuff? Shall I send over weed killer or barnacle remover, or could we beat it to death with a stick? Why not tell him, Dad? Castor inquired. Very well, I will. Hazel, send bicycles. Want to buy one? To their surprise, Captain Vandenberg answered, Maybe. Got a Raleigh Sandman? Tell him yes, Pollux said. A number one condition, brand new tires, a bargain. Slow up there, his father interrupted. I've seen your load. If you've got a bike in first class condition, Raleigh or any other make, you've got it well hidden. Oh, Dad, it will be by the time we deliver. What do you suppose he wants a bicycle for, dear? Dr. Stone asked. Prospecting? Surely not. Probably just sightseeing. All right, Hazel, you can send it, but mind you, boys, I'll inspect that vehicle myself. Van trusts me. Hazel pushed herself away from the rig. Let the boys tell their own whoppers. I'm getting bored with this chit chat. Castor took over at the key and started to dicker. The passenger skipper, it developed, really was willing to buy a bicycle. After a leisurely while, they settled on a price well under Castor's asking price, attractively under the usual prices on Mars, but profitably over what the boys had paid on Luna. This for delivery FOB Phobos circum Mars. Roger Stone exchanged affectionate insults and gossip with his friend from time to time over the next several days. During the following week, the war god came within phone range, but the conversations dropped off and stopped. They had exhausted topics of conversation. The war god had made her closest approach and was pulling away again. They did not hear from her for more than 3 weeks. The call was taken by Meade. She hurried aft to the hold where her father was helping the twins spray enamel on reconditioned bicycles. Daddy, you're wanted on the phone. War god, master to master, official. Coming. He hurried forward and took the call. Rolling Stone, Captain Stone speaking. War God, commanding officer speaking. Captain, can you? Just a moment. This does not sound like Captain Vandenberg. It isn't. It's Raleigh, second officer. I understood that your captain wanted me officially. Let me speak to him. I'm trying to explain, Captain. The officer sounded strained and irritable. I am the commanding officer. Both Captain Vandenberg and Mr. O'Flynn are on the binnacle list. Hey, sorry. Nothing serious, I hope. I'm afraid it is, sir. 37 cases on the sick list this morning and 4 deaths. Great Scott, man, what is it? I don't know, sir. Well, what does your medical officer say it is? That's it, sir. The surgeon died during the mid-watch. Oh. Captain, can you possibly match with us? Do you have enough maneuvering margin? What? Why? You have a medical officer aboard, haven't you? Huh? But she's my wife. She's an MD, is she not? Roger Stone remained silent for a long moment. Then he said, I'll call you back shortly, sir. It was a top-level conference limited to Captain Stone, Dr. Stone, and Hazel. First, Dr. Stone insisted on calling the war god and getting a full report on symptoms and progress of the disease. When she switched off, her husband said, "Well, Edith, what is it?" "I don't know. I'll have to see it." "Now, see here, I'm not going to have you risking—" "I'm a doctor, Roger. You're not in practice, not now, and you are the mother of a family. It's quite out of the question." "I am a doctor, Roger." He sighed heavily. "Yes, dear. The only thing to be determined is whether or not you can match in with the war god. Have you two reached an answer? We'll start computing. I'm going aft and check over my supplies." She frowned. "I didn't expect to have to cope with an epidemic." When she was gone, Roger turned his face, twisted with indecision, to Hazel. "What do you think, Mother?" "Son, you don't stand a chance. She takes her oath seriously. You've known that a long time." "I haven't taken the Hippocratic Oath. If I won't move the ship, there's nothing she can do about it." "You're not a doctor, true, but you're a master in space. I guess the succor and rescue rule might apply." "The devil with rules. This is Edith." "Well," Hazel said slowly, "I guess I might stack the Stone family up against the welfare of the entire human race in a pinch myself, but I can't decide it for you." "I won't let her do it. It's not me. There's Buster. He's no more than a baby still. He needs his mother." "Yes, he does." "That settles it. I'm going aft and tell her." "Wait a minute. If that's your decision, Captain, you won't mind me saying that's the wrong way to do it." "Eh?" "The only way you'll get it past your wife is to get on that computer and come out with the answer you're looking for, an answer that says it's physically impossible for us to match with them and still reach Mars." "Oh, you're right. Look, will you help me fake it?" "I suppose so." "Then let's get busy." "As you say, sir. You know, Roger, if the war god comes in with an unidentified and uncontrolled disease aboard, they'll never let her make it to port at Mars. They'll swing her in a parking orbit, fuel her up again, and send her back at next optimum. What of it? It's nothing to me if fat tourists and a bunch of immigrants are disappointed." "Check, but I was thinking of something else. With Van and the first officer sick, maybe about to check in, if the second officer comes down with it too, the war god might not even get as far as a parking orbit." Roger Stone did not have to have the thought elaborated. A ship approaching a planet, unless maneuvered at the last by a skilled pilot, can do one of only two things: crash or swing on past and out endlessly into empty space to take up a comet-like orbit which arrives nowhere ever. He covered his face with his hands. "What do I do, Mother?" "You are captain's son." He sighed. "I suppose I knew it all along." "Yes, but you had to struggle with it first." She kissed him. "Orders, son?" "Let's get to it. It's a good thing we didn't waste any margin in departure." "That it is." When Hazel told the others the news, Castor asked, "Does Dad want us to compute a ballistic?" "No." "A good thing, for we've got to get those bikes inboard fast. Come on, Paul. Meade, how about suiting up and giving us a hand, unless Mother needs you?" "She does," answered Hazel, "to take care of Lowell and keep him out of the way. But you won't be bringing the bikes inboard." "What? You can't balance the ship for maneuvers with them where they are. Besides, the first blast would probably snap the wires and change your mass factor." "Cass, where are your brains? Can't you see the situation? We jettison." "Huh? We throw away our bikes after dragging them almost to Mars?" "Your bikes, our books, and everything else we can do without. The rough run through on the computer made that clear as quartz. The only way we can do this maneuver is still be sure of having a safe margin for homing in. Your father is checking over the weight schedule right now." "But—" Castor's face suddenly relaxed and became impassive. "Aye, aye, ma'am." The twins were suiting up, but had not yet gone outside when Pollux was struck by a notion. "Cass, we cut the bikes loose, then what happens?" "We charge it off to experience and try to recover from Four Planets Transit. They won't pay up, of course." "Use your skull. Where do the bikes end up?" "Huh? Why, at Mars." "Right, or pretty near. In the orbit we're in now, they'll swing in mighty close and then head down Sunside again. Suppose on closest approach, we are standing there waiting to snag them. Not a chance. It'll take us just as long to get to Mars and in a different orbit, same as the war gods. Yes, but now just supposing. I wish I had a spare radar beacon to hang on them. Then, if we could reach them, we'd know where they were. Well, we haven't got one. Say, where did you put that used reflecting foil? Huh? Oh, I see, Grandpa. Something your senile decay is not quite so noticeable. The stone had started out, of course, covered on one side of her living quarters by mirror bright aluminum foil. As she drifted farther and farther from the sun, reflecting the sun's heat had grown less necessary, absorbing it more desirable. To reduce the load on the ship's heating and cooling system, square yards of it were peeled up and taken inside to store from week to week. Let's ask Dad. Hazel stopped them at the hatch to the control room. He's at the computer. What's the complaint? Hazel, the reflecting foil we've been salvaging, is it on the jettison list? Certainly. We'll pick up some more on Mars for the trip back. Why? A radar corner, that's why. They explained the plan. She nodded. A long chance, but it makes sense. See here, wire everything we jettison to the bikes. We might get it all back. Sure thing. The twins got busy. While Pollux gathered together the bunches of bicycles, all but a few in good repair and brave with new paint, Castor constructed a curious geometrical toy. With 8-gauge wire, aluminum foil, and sticky tape, he made a giant square of foil edged and held flat with wire. Then he bisected at right angles with a second square. The two squares he again bisected at the remaining possible right angle with a third square. The result was 8 shiny right-angled corners facing among them in all possible directions, a radar reflector. Each corner would bounce radar waves directly back to source, a principle easily illustrated with a rubber ball, and any room or box corner. The final result was to step up the effectiveness of radar from an inverse fourth power law to an inverse square law, in theory at least. In practice, it would be somewhat less than perfectly efficient, but the radar response of the assembly would be increased enormously. A mass so tagged would stand out in a radar screen like a candle in a cave. This flimsy giant kite Castor anchored to the ball of bicycles at other Jetsam with an odd bit of string. No stronger link was necessary. Out here, no vagrant wind would blow it away. No one would cut it loose. Paul, he said, go bank on the port and tell them we're ready. Pollux walked forward and did so, rapping on the quartz first to attract his grandmother's attention, then tapping code to report. While he was gone, Castor attached a piece of paper reading, "Not for salvage. This cargo is in free transit by intention. The undersigned owner intends to recover it and all parties not to claim it as abandoned. UP Rev Stat 193401, Roger Stone, Master, Private Yacht Rolling Stone, Luna." When Pollux came back, he said, Hazel says to go ahead, but take it easy. Of course. Castor untwisted the single wire that held the ungainly mass to the ship, then stood back and watched it. It did not move. He reached out and gave it the gentlest shove with his little finger, then continued watching. Slowly, slowly, it separated from the ship. He wished to disturb its orbit as little as possible to make it easy to find. The petty vector he had placed on it, an inch a minute was his guess, would act for all the days from there to Mars. He wanted the final sum to remain small. Pollux twisted around and picked out the winking gleam of the war god. Will the jet be clear of it when we swing ship? He asked anxiously. Quit worrying, I already figured that. The maneuver to be performed was of the simplest, point to point in space in a region which could be treated as free of gravity strain since the two ships were practically the same distance from the sun and Mars was too far away to matter. There were 4 simple steps. Cancellation of the slight vector difference between the two ships, the relative speed with which the war god was pulling away. Acceleration toward the war god, transit of the space between them, deceleration to match orbits and lie dead in space relative to each other on arrival. Steps 1 and 2 would be combined by vector addition. Step 3 was simply waiting time. The operation would be 2 maneuvers, 2 blasts on a jet. But step 3, the time it would take to reach the war god, could be enormously cut down by lavish use of reactive mass. Had time been no object, they could have, as Hazel put it, closed the gap by throwing rocks off the stern. There was an infinite number of choices, each requiring different amounts of reactive mass. One choice would have saved the bicycles and their personal possessions, but would have stretched the transit time out to over 2 weeks. This was a doctor's emergency. Dr. Roger Stone elected to jettison. But he did not tell the twins this, and he did not require them to work a ballistic. He did not care to let them know of the choice between sacrificing their capital or letting strangers wait for medical attention. After all, he reflected, the twins were pretty young. 11 hours from blast time, the Stone hung in space close by the war god. The ships were still plunging toward Mars at some 16 miles per second relative to each other, though they were stationary, except that the liner continued her stately rotation end over end. Dr. Stone, her small figure encumbered not only with a spacesuit, pressure bottles, radio, suit jet, and lifelines, but also with a Santa Claus pack of surgical supplies, stood with her husband on the side of the Stone nearest the liner. Not knowing exactly what she might need, she had taken all that she believed could be spared from the stock of their own craft: drugs, antibiotics, instruments, supplies. The others had been kissed goodbye inside and told to stay there. Lowell had cried and tried to keep his mother from entering the lock. He had not been told what was going on, but the emotions of the others were contagious. Roger Stone was saying anxiously, "Now see here, the minute you have this under control, back you come, you hear?" She shook her head. "I'll see you on Mars, dearest." "No, indeed. No, Roger, I might act as a carrier. We can't risk it." "You might act as a carrier coming back to us on Mars, too. Don't you ever expect to come back?" She ignored the rhetorical question. "On Mars, there will be hospitals, but I can't risk a family epidemic in space." "Edith, I've got a good mind to refuse to—" "They're ready for me, dear. See?" Over their heads, 200 yards away, a passenger lock on the rotation axis of the mighty ship had opened. Two small figures spilled silently out, flipped neatly to boot contact, stood on the ship's side, their heads pointing down at Mr. and Mrs. Stone. Roger Stone called into his microphone, "War God." "War God, aye, aye. Are you ready? Whenever you are, stand by for transfer." Acting Captain Rowley had proposed sending a man over to conduct Dr. Stone across the gap. She had refused, not wishing to have anyone from the infected ship in contact with the Rolling Stone. Now she said, "Are my lines free for running, Roger?" "Yes, dearest." He had bent several lines together, one end to her waist, the other to a pad eye. "Will you do my boots, dear?" He kneeled and unzipped her magnetic boots without speaking, his voice having become uncertain. He straightened and she put her arms around him. They embraced awkwardly, hampered by the suits, hampered by the extra pack she carried. "Adios, my darling," she said softly. "Take care of the children." "Edith, take care of yourself." "Yes, dear. Steady me now." He slipped his hands to her hips. She stepped out of the boots, was now held against the ship only by his hands. "Ready? 1, 2." They crouched down together. "3." She jumped straight away from the ship, her lines snaking after her. For long, long seconds, she sailed straight out over his head, closing the gap between her and the liner. Presently, it became evident that she had not leaped quite straight. Her husband got ready to haul her back in. But the reception committee was ready for that exigency. One of them was swinging a weighted line around his head. He let the end of it swing farther and farther out. As she started to move past the side of the war god, he swung it against her safety line. The weighted end wrapped itself around her line. Back at the Rolling Stone, Roger snubbed her line and stopped her. The man on the liner gently pulled her in. The second man caught her and snapped a hook to her belt, then unfastened the long line from the stone. Before she entered the lock, she waved and the door closed. Roger Stone looked at the closed door for a moment, then pulled in the line. He let his eyes drop to the pair of little boots left standing empty beside him. He pulled them loose, held them to him, and plodded back to his own airlock. And we'll follow the Stone's adventures further next time.